Good morning, good afternoon to those continuing to trickle in and join us. Very excited to be welcoming guests from across all of our chapters here today simultaneously from different parts of the country and throughout North America and different phases of the COVID recovery. We're so pleased to be able to bring everyone together. We'll give about another 2 minutes for more of the audience to trickle in, and then I'll get started with some of our housekeeping before we get into lots of great discussion for you today. Okay, I'll do this once more. They say third time's a charm. So good morning, good afternoon, welcome. We're excited to have people joining us across all of our chapters here today as we bring you the second of our virtual webinars within the new reality we find ourselves in. Fortunate to still be able to bring together thought leadership from across the industry from a variety of perspectives and to have you all join us virtually. So welcome, thank you for taking time out of your day. I want to start by giving a special thank you to our foundational partners. It's with their support that events like this are able to occur no matter where we are, and we're very grateful to them for their support of our organization and the contributions back to the industry at large. We'd love to hear from you, so if you're following along and tweeting or posting to Instagram or on your LinkedIn, the hashtag and the handle for you to use is @SMCC_CCC. It's a great way to stay up to speed on all the variety of events and programming that we have coming. So do follow us across each of these channels for the latest and greatest. We'd also love to hear from you guys directly. We'll be circulating a post-event survey following today's forum. I appreciate you taking some time to let us know how we did and share some thoughts on what we can do to continue providing value with these future opportunities. Also pleased to share that the membership deadline, the application deadline for our Activate Mentorship Program has been extended to June 29th. We're pleased to be able to relaunch this program in a virtual format, giving emerging professionals within the industry the opportunity to be matched with a diverse group of leaders across properties, brands, and agencies. I was fortunate to participate in the inaugural class and be mentored by Steve Marshman at Wasserman. It's really a great program to build out your network and to learn from some of the best in our business. And you can head to the SMCC website for more information for how to register. We'll also be continuing to bring you more of these restructured events. Up next will be another webinar similar to today for July. And then in August, we're back with a modified summer social. So keep your eyes peeled in your social media and email for more details on both of those events. And last but certainly not least, I know we've been in this COVID reality for a while, so likely familiar with Zoom and all the different video platforms, but a few key housekeeping items for you. We are recording this session, so it will be available after the fact for registrants to view. You're able to submit your questions at any time via the Q&A, which you'll see just in the bottom control bar, and that will allow you to have questions directed to the panelists, so that we'll have some time at the end for an audience Q&A. If you're having any difficulty hearing, you can go to your audio settings and check for speaker settings, but failing that, you can also post a question in the Q&A, and we'll have our tech support do our best to help you troubleshoot. We do have two, before we get into Market Watch, we've got two panels put together today. We were really blessed to have such a wide group joining us. And so we've extended our window. So we have 90 minutes of content prepared for you today. If you do have to drop off at any point, again, you will receive a link to the recording of the video. So without further ado, I'm going to pass to my colleague and partner in crime with putting together today's event, Gord Hendren. Gord is president and CEO of Charlton Insights, and him and his team have compiled some research and insights specific to the esports landscape that they're going to walk us through today. Thank you, Gord.
Hey, thanks, Jared. We're just getting our screen share set up here. Happy Wednesday to everybody. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick market watch segment here, about 10 minutes. We've done quite a bit of esports work in the last couple of years, and we are tracking it on an ongoing basis, not only on our own side, but also with our partner, YouGov Sport. So with regards to the idea of esports, obviously it's one of the sports that's in the marketplace today. It's been staying alive. It's been ongoing in terms of live events, while many of them are not. When we take a look at sports these days, we like to look at the DNA. We like to look at the emotional connectors. What are the drivers? So this is an interesting comparison of the of esports and traditional sports. So as you can see at the top, enjoy watching the best of the best play a sport or a game. So pretty well on par between the two. And actually, I would say that overall, we've found that there's a lot of similarities in terms of the emotional drivers of both esports and traditional sports. What would link to the first one, which would be the fourth one down, is getting tips and strategies on how to play the sport better than myself. And that actually is a spike attribute for esports that would link into watching the best of the best. Interestingly, the second most strongest one would be the idea of a social aspect of creating a conversation with my friends and with my family. Esports is tracking a little bit higher, but it's not statistically significant just given the sample size here, but it obviously is directionally higher. The one that I want to point out, though, is a spike attribute for esports is the idea of bonding activity with my kids. It's really interesting. I've interviewed a number of people on this topic, and certainly parents talk about the idea of learning to love esports and realizing that their kids' heroes in sports often are in esports, and that's very different from the parents' experience, which they might have been in hockey or football or baseball or basketball. So there's this, I'm learning to love esports to be in touch with my kids. Now we know the incidence of playing games is actually quite high, over 60% across the board. The incidence of playing esports in the range of 30%. So parents are having to readjust and get in tune with their kids on this one. With regards to hometown pride, at this point in time, esports are on the lower end of this in terms of comparison to traditional sports. And this is a really powerful motivator in sports. And I think because esports had to cancel a number of their in-person live events because of COVID, that's why I see this one's underdeveloped. But I do see going forward that this one will actually increase. So this next slide just shows us in the orange slide is what's called net buzz. So what that means is we ask a scale question in terms of positive buzz, negative buzz about an individual sport. And in this case, the positive buzz outweighs the negative buzz. So as you can see, it's trending above the line for traditional sports. And the peak was in May, but it's generally trending above traditional sports. So I would, give the esports the call out for generating more buzz than the traditional sports as a group. Now we have some more breakout here. As you know, in Canada, NHL is premier and is now starting to get a little bit more traction as we're getting into the phase of actually considering that games are going to be played, but there's lots of talk about which sites, what players, what's the hub site, and so on. But esports is still very much holding its own with NHL and NBA and tracking above the average of all overall traditional sports. So we did a little bit of a scan of what's going on in the industry in Canada in terms of activations and so on. So we found that they broke into 3 groups. The first group is promoting partners. So the idea is much like traditional sports would do. It's activating contests and features. So some of the examples, some call-out examples would be with the Toronto Defiant, Defiant Desk with Canon, short videos showing fans and Defiant players with their desk setup. So including streaming equipment for Canon. So it's a really good Canon promotion in that way. So, very much in the traditional approach. Also, Bell Power Play. Bell is obviously a major provider of internet and connectivity. So obviously a good connection that way. With the Raptors uprising, we see the Aviva defensive play of the game, OLG winning game ball. So highlights of MVPs and past matches. So just good examples of promoting the partner in their regular course of business promotion. The second category was engaging with fans. And this is an overall trend that we see in general in the activation community. So in other words, it's going to integrating branding into the actual experience. It's also the idea of branded content. So in other words, you are less interruptive, more engaging. So trying to connect with teams, with players, and connect with brands. So some examples for calling out here was the Toronto Ultra, the Join the Squad contest, the Defiant, a coaching session with a player, the Titans, Pizza Hut's game night meal. That's an in-game party with a restaurant promotion attached to it. So they're trying to get, leveraging the experience. And with the Toronto Uprising, Northcote presented by LG. So it's a behind the scenes with Raptors Uprising players. So the overall theme of this is trying to get to more of branded content. And that's a trend we see in the marketplace in general. So the last category was engagement with the moment. So knowing that esports fandom skews heavily towards Gen Z and millennials, there's a very high expectation for community and social responsibility. So during COVID-19, there's no question that that opportunity is front and center. So we see that the Toronto Ultra have done a Northern Rivals contest in partnership with Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation to protect at-risk frontline workers. And I know that there were a few questions that came in from causes asking about, is there an opportunity for causes with esports? And I would say absolutely yes. And this is a very good example of that happening. In addition, both the Ultra and the Defiant have been doing thank yous to frontline workers, which has been definitely a theme across multiple brands and multiple properties, very much. Now, having said that, there's no question that there's some clutter in that regard, but it's definitely the right thing to be doing, no doubt about it. And then finally, with regards to the Titans, they have done a salute to Pride Month. And Raptors Uprising have done a call out to Black Lives Matter. And know that that's an easy one. You really have to walk the talk, of course, and do, make sure you have an internal audit to ensure that you are abiding by protocol on that one. But certainly, again, a very powerful issue, one that's very important to our society. So we will be distributing the deck. If you have any questions, please write in with them, and look forward to hearing the panel. It's a really good one. So signing off, and back over to you, Jared.
Thanks, Gord. Appreciate it. It's my pleasure to now introduce our moderator, and a woman I owe a great deal to for my ongoing knowledge of the esports space, my colleague, the director of esports in Momentum's New York office, Tatiana Tacca. Hello, Tatiana. Good morning.
Hello, great to be here. I'm really excited to have an awesome conversation about esports today. So what we'll do is essentially we're going to be having two panels today. The first one is going to be a bit more about the sponsorship opportunity in esports and gaming, focusing in on the Canadian market, followed by a conversation around overall gaming as well as esports opportunities that are readily available during COVID. We'll look at some specific case studies from some world-class brands and properties who have been absolutely crushing it during this time. So, before I introduce our panelists, I want to just kind of clear some air in regards to the definition of esports and gaming, as well as demystify some of the perceptions around esports. Essentially, esports is a segment of gaming, whereas gaming is the consumption of video games, whether that's console, PC, or mobile, or watching influencers play those games. Esports is the competitive video gaming segment, where people are watching pro players playing for teams, competing within leagues and tournaments. In regards to a few statements of facts about esports fans, esports fans are 60% millennial, so this is not necessarily a hyper young audience. This is a very valuable cord-cutting, cord-never millennial segment. 30% of esports fans are women. Esports fans have higher than average household incomes with incredible spending habits. And 70% believe that sponsorships is good for the gaming industry. Sponsorships is a form of legitimization of passions for esports fans. So when looking at that as a whole, we can really keep those kind of high-level things in mind when diving into the specific opportunities. So I'm happy to have Gopal from the Canucks Sports and Entertainment, Allison Walker of Overactive Media, and Dave Rivers of Bell Media joining us. And I'll allow them to turn on their videos, mics, and introduce themselves real quick before we dive into questions.
Great, thanks Tatiana. And first off, thanks to the SMCC team for putting this together. I've been enjoying these events for many years, and it's about time that I try to give back here. So Gopal Patel, I'm the Director of Business Development with Canucks Sports and Entertainment on the corporate partnerships team. I've been in sports marketing for just over 10 years now. Very lucky to have started my career and spent 7 years with MLSE in Toronto. And then 3 years ago, moved out to the West Side to join the Canucks. In the past 2 years, I've been really focused on building our esports business. We've jumped in a pretty big way, owning two professional teams, the Vancouver Titans in the Overwatch League and the Seattle Surge in the Call of Duty League. And we also have a very strategic partnership with Enthusiast Gaming, which is one of North America's biggest gaming media conglomerates. Ultimately, my role is digging into this esports space and understanding how we can take a lot of the learnings and disciplines from traditional sports sponsorships and apply them to the esports world. And it's been challenging, but it's been a ton of fun, and really looking to work with as many brands as possible to build case studies.
Brilliant, thank you. Allison, would you love to jump in?
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Allison Walker. I'm the Senior VP of Business at Overactive Media. I get to oversee all of our business functions and corporate services. And for this call, specifically partnerships and marketing across our 3 brands and 5 teams. Like Gopal, we have 2 Canadian teams, the Toronto Ultra, as you saw. Thank you very much, Gord, for those for sharing some of that. Toronto Ultra in the Call of Duty League and Toronto Defiant in the Overwatch League. We have a League of Legends franchise in Berlin and the LEC in Europe under our Mad Lions brand, an SLO team in Madrid, also League of Legends under the Mad Lions brand, and we are the reigning champs of Flashpoint, the new CSGO league, also under our Mad Lions brand. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. The folks you have on the phone are knowledgeable, many very endemic. I come from the more traditional sports side, having had the pleasure of working with the Olympic Committee in the amateur sport and MLSE as well on in professional sport, as well as a media background. So really looking forward to this, and also very happy to pass the torch to my partner, Dave Rivers from Bell.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to, just a quick introduction. My name is Dave Rivers. I'm responsible for our corporate marketing strategy and sponsorship nationally. So I look at our coast to coast to coast portfolio as it relates to all of our experiential investment and brand strategy. How I ended up on this panel is really sort of a legacy that started for myself, and I'm describing myself as a legacy about 20 years ago. It was my first LAN party and esports foray into the gaming space. I am, you know, a gamer at heart. So for me, I've always been a champion of this category. And for us, as I started to see the evolution of what gaming was evolving into in terms of competitive play, really took on the corporate responsibility of driving BCE's gaming strategy over the last 5 or 6 years. And that's culminated in investments with Overactive Media. Really excited to be a part, you know, a marketing partner, and at some level, a part owner of OAM. And also through our position with MLSE, you know, with Raptors Uprising and NBA 2K is another, you know, team inside of the professional sports leagues that I get the opportunity, myself and my team, to have oversight and leadership on. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much. We'll jump in then. When brands are essentially looking to drive their own KPIs, what is it that esports is uniquely able to deliver on, or better deliver on, in comparison to other sports and entertainment properties? One thing I like to say is that esports is incredibly flexible as this growing space, meaning that there are a lot of a very wide range of KPIs that can be delivered on and won. So would love to hear your experiences and thoughts on that.
I can start.
I think,
Go ahead, Gopal. You go first. No, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when brands are looking at esports over potential other opportunities, for me, one of the keys is certainly the audience that you're engaging with. If you're a brand that's looking to connect with a young, diverse, highly engaged, but very difficult to reach community, then you certainly should be looking at esports. You know, the vast majority of our esports fans are 16 to 34 years old, which, you know, is a group that can be very, very hard to connect with. And ultimately, you know, we find that gaming is social currency amongst this next generation, where, you know, kids are going to school and they're starting to talk about it, similar to what traditional sports was years ago. And so brands really have the opportunity to be an authentic part of that conversation, and those are the ones that are going to be ultimately successful. Again, you know, Gen Z is a big part of this space as we look at the future of esports and gaming. And they're very digitally savvy. They're, you know, Tatiana, you mentioned off the top, they're blocking ads. They're using private web browsers. They're cutting the cord. So how do you connect with them? It's through something that they're passionate about, like gaming. But they're also very marketing savvy. They know when brands are trying to speak with them, and they're really only responding to the ones that have something meaningful to offer back. So it really has to be that two-way conversation, and tapping into the passion of gaming is certainly one way to do that. And then, you know, another area is engagement, and Gord mentioned it off the top as well. We've found through a lot of work, including with Charlton Insights, that engagement levels in gaming are actually even higher than what you see in traditional sports. And, you know, that's because gaming is really a part of the DNA of our fans, and it's part of what makes them an individual. So, you know, essentially, if you're a brand that's looking to develop, you know, some relevance amongst that younger age demographic, you really should be thinking about esports.
Love it. Very great point.
Absolutely agree. Good answers, Gopal. I'll just add two things just from a specific KPI standpoint. This is, as Gopal said, a very engaged audience. And one of the great things, because it is a digitally native audience, is that we can be hyper targeted in terms of reaching, whether it's one of our key segments. Gord did some great work for us on our segmentation analysis, the core gamer, the core esports fan, Canadian esports fans, of which there are almost 4.5 million of those. We can be hyper targeted, whether it's for ourselves and our own brand initiatives. One example would be ticket sales. We knew exactly who we were targeting with our promotions to buy tickets for our live events that obviously didn't happen. So it's a very efficient way to reach an audience that you're looking for. And by extension, we can do that with our partners, leveraging our own first party and third party data to offer an extension, an audience extension to our partners to be able to really target their message to that coveted millennial and Gen Z fan.
Great. And overall, you know, brands, especially now during COVID, are looking to try to test those waters a little bit more. They don't necessarily, they want to get into esports. They want to try something out. They want to, you know, find some success in this space. So when brands are looking for a test and learn, let's say, you know, to get them some sort of exposure to esports, what would you say are some ways to do that?
Well, I'm going to jump in on that one just to take that question. I'm going to back up a little bit and sort of just qualify a couple of things as we looked at our strategy and our brand strategy in the gaming segment. You know, I hear a lot, and it's, you know, I'm going to call it out and just, you know, sort of talk about, we need to sort of dispel some of the decision making anchored and biased around gaming. Right. So when we talk about legitimate sport, we talk about legitimate fandom, we talk about that passionate fan base. This is identical to pro sport. And you know, and for me, I've never seen it differently. And I've been fortunate that I've been surrounded by a leadership team that sort of bought that vision as I you know, frankly positioned it in our org. So, you know, as the people that are listening to this discussion today, really frame your conversation when you're looking at brand position with esport in the same way you would with a Raps, a Leafs, an Argos, or any other brand that you're working with. So for me, that's like, let's put that aside now and let's really talk about segmentation. Because ultimately, that's what it boils down to for us as a strategy. When we look at our overall corporate strategy and we look at share of market in terms of where we have penetration in terms of our product line, gaming as a segment and the esport influencer, because ultimately that's the echelon of, you know, I'll describe it as, you know, professional sport, the same way, you know, pro athletes wearing brands. You know, for me, I'm looking at it in those same type of relationships where if it was an energy drink brand or if it was a clothing brand or frankly, you know, pick an example that we're all familiar with. So as I looked at that strategy and then sort of pivoting and looking back into our organization, it became very easy to start to look at engaged audience, already spoke to in terms of Gopal and Allison, looked at the ability to segment in a very efficient way. And then frankly, engage with a highly active community. You know, I always feel like, and this is a bit of a you know, again, one of these urban myths, like you'll hear things like, oh, the gaming community is very toxic. It's no more toxic and no more volatile than the professional sports scene when, you know, there's a major decision made. You know, Gopal probably experienced this a little bit just this week with the Vancouver Whitecaps and a decision just to dismiss, you know, a senior executive there. The fans of the Whitecaps reacted. So for me, I see this as just inherent with a passionate group of people, and you just need to set that expectation inside.
No, I think that's a really great point. Some of our own data shows that there's about a 20% overlap between players who played League of Legends and Fortnite last year, about a 30% overlap between Overwatch and League of Legends. So what that showcases is there's not just one esports audience, and it's about taking a very nuanced and you know, an understanding of what kind of defines these different scenes, demographics, and having an upfront approach, strategic thinking. You know, do you want to focus in a little bit more on lifestyle and gamers and influencers, which isn't necessarily esports, but has a high engagement, or do you want to focus in more on, you know, localized gaming in which Overwatch and Call of Duty have these, and NBA 2K have these local Canadian teams, branches, and relevance. So very much great points.
Yeah, I want to add on, that was great, Dave. I think also from an education standpoint, it's good to understand how quickly esports, the segment, Tatiana, you spoke to, is evolving. The reason we and perhaps Gopal got into the franchise league model is because there's sustainability, there's stability, and we're providing that to our brand partners like Bell in our case. there's a competition schedule, there's a overarching league there. It's a closed ecosystem, so it's not the Wild West anymore in some cases. And we're able to drive the asset creation and the activation creation that can drive that ROI back to our brand partners. The idea that people can dip their toe in, and there's been lots of discussion about whether COVID created an opportunity for esports. Well, of course it created an opportunity, and Gord shared that buzz scale. There was a lot of buzz, but esports continues on its trajectory regardless of whether COVID hit us or not. And it still speaks to the importance of authentic partnerships. Fans believe in sponsorship, believe in brands because they can see that they need it to drive long-term sustainability in our ecosystem. So as a brand, you need to be thinking about ways to authentically create benefit for fans. When I think about Dave's world, I mean, obviously you need the internet to game. And a lot of the work that Bell is doing is around trying to drive that benefit to the Gen Z and millennial audience. The free play at events, our events, EGLX events, the idea that you're allowing gamers to engage with communities and to actually learn how to play, a lot of that is thanks to Bell and their investment. So that authentic, it's no different than traditional sport, to Dave's point, but the one thing that is maybe slightly different is this digitally native group is on every social platform literally that there is, and there is a groundswell, a movement that starts at the grassroots at the fan level that really does help define how we govern ourselves and the decisions we make. And so if you're not authentically integrating as a brand, you will hear it from fans. And so that's really the trick as a brand owner, is how do you do that? How do you provide benefit back to those fans?
Yeah, and that's fantastic. You nailed it there, Allison. I mean, I've had a ton of conversations with Canadian brands, and they all seem, interested in esports, but there is that pretty big hurdle of, how do I jump on board? It can be a little bit intimidating or overwhelming. And I think one of the things that we really need to do is take a step back and really have an open mind to it. Not everybody is a gamer. You might not understand it. You might not necessarily even like it. And honestly, that doesn't matter. You just need to understand that this community is really powerful. And they certainly want to be part of something special. And as a marketer, if you can tap into that, I mean, that's where the true value is. Allison talked a lot about, being authentic. And for me, I think that the second thing that brands really need to do is sort of find their voice within gaming and what is their reason to be. And that can be, another difficult task. So there are really 5 pillars that I like to walk brands through to help them find that voice. And I'm going to nerd out a little bit here on the virtual backgrounds, just because I'm a bit of a visual person. So, there are really these 5 pillars here that I like to walk brands through. The first one is social connectivity. How are we bringing this community together? And as a brand, how are you sort of that hero at that moment of that social connectivity? The second one is build their skills. So we found a stat that just under 60% of Canadian teens believe that gaming is a legitimate career option. So how are we helping them get to that next level? We work with one of our partners, Rotsi, who makes gaming chairs. And so we get our fans to submit their own gameplay and then have our players sort of critique it and provide immediate feedback that essentially is going to get them to where they want to be in terms of their goals. Feed their passion. I mean, that's one that we see in the traditional sports space quite a bit. We're really just giving them access to players, giving them contests and content. The next one here, I'm just going to move my head, is grow the game, which is a really important one within this space because, I feel that the gaming community feels as though they're sort of a level under where traditional sports is. And when big brands step up and sort of pound their chest and say, we get gaming and we want to be a part of it, fans really react to that. An example that I'll share on that is one of our partners, Circle K. For a 6-week period, they put the faces of our players, our esports players, on their cups across Western Canada. And that was a big statement. And our fan base has reacted in a really positive way. And Circle K is really, a big part of our brand that we interact, the way we interact with our community. And then the last one really just comes down to the demographic. How are we making the world a better place? This Gen Z and millennials are thinking about things like sustainability and inclusivity how can you sort of take your CSR platforms and attach it to this world? So yeah, I mean, really it comes down to finding that voice, and ultimately, you know, what is that authentic connection? But once you find that, things certainly become easier.
Brilliant. I have to say that's a really baller webinar move. Changing the background. I
I
love
mean,
that.
we're in esports, so we've got to be technologically savvy, right?
It's yeah, brilliant. Love that. I think this is a really great segue into diving a little bit more into the Canadian market in particular. You know, esports is very much of a global phenomenon. I'd say North America is a crucial market, growing insanely quickly. And there's more opportunity now than ever to really focus in and localize on the Canadian esports and esports space. So I'd love to hear from you ways to localize, how to really focus in on this market if, you know, you're a Canadian brand, or if Canada is a key market for a brand strategic initiative.
I'll jump in on that question as by way of example. You know, and Allison knows this well of our ongoing conversations together, where, you know, OAM has a portfolio that is it's international in nature, and the reality is my product is geared towards the Canadian borders, right? That's really where our connectivity lives. So for us, what's been critical in our strategy is looking at where we literally have internet connectivity and, frankly, wireless connectivity in the Canadian marketplace. So what I love about it, and both Gopal and Allison have spoke to, is that hyper segmentation. And because it's a digital native platform, it allows for us to really reach out on a one-to-one relationship with the gaming community. And for us, our strategy is sort of threefold, if I could describe it as the stool. There's three legs involved in it. One of it is esports, in terms of the professional sports scene, the upper echelon of gaming. But we also look very closely at a couple other areas as we round out our engagement of that audience. In the same way we talked about, and it was Gord referencing fandom in sport, is recognizing the fans of the game. They may never, aspirationally, they'll never be, you know, using metaphors we're familiar with, like they'll never be a Michael Jordan on the basketball court, but they still like to practice, or the Vince Carter. But they still like to play the game. So for me, it's always about finding that community that is supportive of that you know, that upper echelon of esport and professional gameplay, and engaging in that community. So as much as it may be, you know, we're using, you know, Gord referenced it off the top, we're, you know, creating some amazing content with all three of our organizations and the teams that we work with, you know, Toronto Defiant and Ultra and Uprising as sort of the three pro teams that we work with. And we also sort of segment, and Tatiana, you spoke to it a little bit. Our portfolio of pro team is reflective of different type of gameplay. So for us, again, it's just another way to segment and focus audience on. But if we're to look at sort of back to the point of how we engage in market, it's a live event, which our reality is that's, you know, we're working through that as we speak, but very much there's a very active gaming community that is, you know, ties festival. There's a festival and live event strategy that lives in Canada, and taking advantage of those opportunities to you know, trial and sample product. It is that influencer strategy. A lot of these aspirational players who are pro, what's amazing about esport is they turn back to the community, and now they become influencers in terms of, you know, sort of playground to podium metaphors from the Olympic movement. It's the gaming community itself is, I've never seen this before in sport, where they actually turn to the people around them and say, oh, hey, I'll help you, you know, make you better. And it's, for me, that's a really, really interesting area for content. So, you know, we've done some really interesting stuff as it relates to, you know, some of our, you know, our Overwatch team, and working with them and sort of building that whole, like, you know, play with a pro, learn how to get better. And it's really that relationship you have with the team itself. So for us, our brand strategy is really, it's tied to events. It's tied to that influencer community and the content creation that happens around it. And then obviously our, you know, the live sport tied to, you know, the esports strategy is really where we anchor it.
Absolutely. No, I think a great point you bring up is that localization. I think in particular, looking at the Overwatch League and Call of Duty homestands, home games, there really wasn't many opportunities, I'd say, for Canadian esports fans to come together in a big kind of community-based setting. It was definitely a huge white space. We saw that when League of Legends brought their finals to Canada. The amount of attention and atmosphere was a major proof of that. And experiential test and learns and experiential opportunities specific to the Canadian market, there weren't as many of them. So I would definitely agree there's been a massive growth, and hopefully it's back soon, because that's one of the really exciting new trends that we've seen in esports and esports as a whole, that more localization opportunity, more experiential opportunity, more live engagement as a whole. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I agree. I think Gopal and Dave have given great examples of activation opportunities, engagement opportunities. I would just say, think about, as a brand marketer, think about, don't get stuck on just gaming. And even if you're not a gamer, put yourself in the shoes of the Gen Z millennial generations. Think about how they consume content. To Dave's point, their behaviors are different than, frankly, mine were and are. We talk a lot about this intersection of gaming, sports, music, lifestyle. It's all coming together in the influencer piece, and what we've seen through COVID with a lot of our friends on professional sport teams and musicians diving into the gaming space and the esports space is really bringing this to the forefront. There really is a platform that goes beyond just video games. So think about it as a broader opportunity. Think about, Dave, you just mentioned the Olympic movement at the COC. When we came out of the Vancouver Games, we really had to change the narrative, because it was no longer about sponsoring a home games. It was about what the platform that is the Canadian Olympic team could offer. And this is no different. This is a group of very engaged fans that think about things like healthy living, health and wellness. Mental health is extraordinarily important. So is there a platform there? Is there, from a community and employee engagement standpoint, there are ways that you can get your staff and employees engaged in this community that both Dave and Gopal have talked about? From music to education, the platforms themselves go far beyond gaming itself. And so I encourage you to think bigger about the marketing objectives you have. Dave is very clear about his marketing objectives, and everything we do with Bell very much ties back to making sure that it's achieving an objective of theirs. And if it doesn't, then we don't do it. And that's a really important part of what we're trying to build authentically here into the long term. So I encourage that bigger picture thinking, and try not to get stuck on, why gaming. And I think people are evolving and learning a lot more about what the opportunities are. So I think we're going to see a lot of growth from a partnership standpoint going forward.
Yeah, there's something I definitely want to add to that. I think that bigger thinking overall opportunity is very much consistent with esports as a whole. When we think about, what can brands do? What can brands actually come in and own and co-create and identify white space and actually fill that in with their own activations? There's a lot of opportunity for that in esports, because properties like yourselves are willing to work with brands and come up with much more out of the box creative solutions. And there's much more cultural overlap with music and film and sports than ever before. So, if a brand really wants to pursue something out of the box, or there's a white space in Canada, there's not enough grassroots tournaments, or there's not enough engagement in collegiate or whatever it is, there's natural opportunities for brands to fill those white spaces.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned they're out of the box, and I love that, because it's one of the reasons that I love working in esports so much, is that we have, it's such an untapped and untouched space that we have the ability to really do things that, on the traditional sports side, I mean, we don't have that word traditional. We really can do whatever we want and have as much fun as possible. And the ability for us to integrate brands is so much greater. And I think Allison mentioned it earlier, esports and gaming fans understand that sponsorship and partnership is something that's necessary in order to grow this space. And so it really does allow us to think outside that box and create some unique and fun activations.
Great. We have about a few more minutes on this panel before we transition on to the next one. We'll be doing a Q&A with all panelists after this one. We'll have about 10 minutes for Q&A. But I wanted to end off with immediate opportunities that brands can tap into. You know, they're watching this, they're like, okay, I'm in. What can we do in the next few months? So when looking at opportunities with your team's properties, what are some immediate white space areas that brands can partner on?
I can certainly jump in where there are tremendous opportunities. I think, Tatiana, you made the point that we would love to get across, which is everything and anything is custom in this esports world. We're very lucky to be in Canada in 2 strong leagues. Dave has referenced this too. We carried on through COVID with online match play, which has kept great continuity and have worked hard to try and ensure that our partners like Bell are still continuing to see the benefit of the partnerships with us. So certainly there are continuous digital opportunities. We haven't spoken about live events very much on this panel, but I will tell you that it is absolutely a core piece of our future from a franchise model standpoint. This is not, I'll just make the point, this is not, the argument isn't that we're displacing traditional sport. There is overlap in our audiences, no doubt, but there also is complement, and our fans want that live interaction. They want to be able to watch live. They want to see their community live. Our watch parties pre-COVID were extraordinarily popular. So live events are coming back. We don't know exactly how and when, but there certainly is a plan for next season to have live events. So stay tuned. And then Dave mentioned this as well. You know, the content is such a huge piece of what we do, and leveraging influencers. So the opportunities are abundant, and yet not in the box, because there are tremendous ways that we can engage with teams. And I would say that about our team and Gopal's teams. Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly echo a lot of what Allison said there. We've got, very similar opportunities on our side, and live events is going to be a big part of it. We're really excited. I mean, pre-COVID, the majority of our time and effort was into figuring out what these events were going to look like. And really, we want to make this almost like a gaming festival rather than just, a competitive gaming event. It's the, combination of music and lifestyle, and really bringing that gaming culture together. So we've got some really big plans on how brands are going to be a part of that. And then, I mean, brands thinking about this space, one thing that I love to leave with them is, maybe consider putting together an internal committee, and having people within your organization that are, fond of gaming, and maybe some that aren't, just come together and think about how your brand can find that place within gaming, because ultimately it'll just make that transition over to the space so much easier.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your time and all your insights. We're going to transition now to the next panel. As a reminder, this topic is going to be on COVID and the esports and gaming opportunities and trends that we've seen as a result of that. So I'm happy to introduce our panelists who can turn on their videos now. We have Greg Villa, the VP of Global Head of Sports, Esports and Entertainment at Gillette. Nathan Lindberg, Regional VP of Twitch. And Matty Lee, VP Head of Partnerships at 100 Thieves. Guys, I'll give you a moment to introduce yourselves and to talk a little bit about your own experiences with COVID, and we'll jump in.
Yeah, since you mentioned me first, I'll jump in. Hi, it's Greg Vi. I'm the VP of Global Sports Marketing. Added esports to it for Gillette. I work across the globe with all of our major sports, with Champions League, with numerous football athletes, cricket, you name it. We try to jump in little by little. We've been working diligently on our programs for esports for about 4 years. We got in, and somebody, I guess in the last panel, mentioned having a small group and a small team, and that's one of the reasons we got involved, and we were fairly successful of moving quickly, because we only had about 3 of us that knew anything about esports or gaming, period. So nobody questioned us too much until it started to show up on the radar. We're actively involved in the Gillette Gaming Alliance, partnerships with Twitch, Boston Uprising, and the Overwatch League. We have some great influencers with Dr. Lupo, Nate Hill, Dog, Alan Zoka in Brazil, and Eldon in Mexico. So with the Gaming Alliance, we also do Bits for Blades, and so we're having a lot of fun with that. So we've kind of got our hands in a lot of different places, esports and also gaming with the EA, with FIFA and the Madden titles as well.
Amazing, thank you.
Hey guys, I guess we're going in introduction order, so I'll jump in. Nathan Lindberg, unofficially Chief Pants Officer at Twitch. I know this format doesn't really conducively convey that, so I'm a little disappointed. Still trying to figure out that technology aspect. But formally, I'm a Regional Vice President for Twitch Properties. Twitch Properties is the third-party and first-party representation group at Twitch. We handle, products and first-party products like TwitchCon and Twitch Rivals, as well as third-party properties in terms of ESL and Team Liquid, lots of influencers, as Greg had mentioned, as well as different events at PAX and Gamescom and E3 and stuff like that. So excited to be here. We actually just announced a huge partnership with Anheuser-Busch InBev's Bud Light brand yesterday. A really great collaboration between their US team and their Canadian team, and really, kind of bringing together some great synergy there. So excited to talk about that. And obviously, with this pandemic world and a lot of shelter in place, there's been a lot of evolution on the Twitch platform, not just in gaming and esports, but overall in terms of music and sports and entertainment. But it's certainly been a really cool place to be able to see innovation happen on a daily basis, and brands and content creators reinventing themselves in new and unique ways has been a really fun thing to be a part of. So excited to be here and talking about it.
Awesome, thank you.
Hey guys, I'm Matty Lee, head of partnerships for 100 Thieves. I oversee all of our commercial efforts outside of our apparel business. For those of you not familiar, we're a premium lifestyle brand for the gaming generation. The North Star is to kind of, try to make things that every gamer can be proud of, and we pay off on that promise across like 3 core business units. Number 1, tier 1 competitive esports. Number 2, a lifestyle entertainment business. And then number 3, through apparel. And so it's been a really exciting ride. I've been there coming up on 2 years. I was one of the first employees there, and we've been super busy in COVID. We've run an LCS digital tailgate. We ran Warzone from home, which I think was one of the first Warzone tournaments once a lot of the shelter in place laws started to take effect. We ran the Valorant Invitational, which was one of the first Valorant tournaments that hit the scene. I think we achieved like 450,000 concurrents on that. We'll be launching Gamers for Equality. We'll be making that announcement this week, I think probably today or tomorrow, very soon. And we also took part in the Chipotle Challenger Series. So we've been active the last 3 months, and super grateful to be here with you guys and the Chief Pants Officer. Nathan and I have actually never had the opportunity to meet each other directly, but I've seen the pants at many events. So it's an honor.
I think Nathan needs a pants cam, like influencers have their keyboard cams.
Yeah,
it's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea. They're infamous. They're not famous.
Amazing. Well, thank you. It's amazing to have all 3 of you. You've both, or all 3 of you have been active not just in esports, but in the experience of lifestyle gaming and influencer activation. So a really interesting mix of both gaming and esports across the board. So with live sports competition and entertainment on pause, starting to get back to things, what we've seen is esports and gaming has really shown its resilience. They've adapted really quickly to an esports format. We've seen gaming traffic have a 75% increase in the US and since shutdowns began. Console sales increased by 155%. Live streaming increased by 45%. Gaming conversation on Twitter grew by 71%. So it's been, and esports have been able to continue an online only format. So, you know, a lot of eyes, a lot of attention, a lot of creative dependence now on gaming. So how can brands find a way to continue to communicate their message through this ecosystem? What types of opportunities and activations can be found here?
You want me to jump in?
Absolutely.
I'd go upstream from there. Like the tactical of like, you know, how you get there. I think it all like really begins with finding and cultivating good partnerships. Like find people that you can trust and trust them, especially if you're new to the space. You know, I came from digital media. I had worked in games marketing my entire career on the publisher side. So I understood the gaming community to a certain extent. I think this is as deep as I've ever been in esports. And it's a really unique audience. And so I think the most important thing, and I think Ali and Gopal both touched on it in the previous panel, you know, we're working through sponsorship and through these activations to unlock gratitude, right? And this is a community that expects a two-way conversation. And I think that, you know, the golden rule in advertising used to be that, you know, they who had the gold made the rules. I think now we're seeing it kind of revert back to like, you know, actually practicing empathy and trying to, you know, be smart and kind of listen and come in almost a humble way into the audience and find ways to support the community and give back to it. And I think that's where we've seen the most success. I think that, you know, early on, there were some instances where, you know, we kind of realized pretty quickly that fans weren't going to settle for second-rate partnerships. And so we had to really be smart and answer the question, like from a community first perspective, like what is the value add here for us doing this thing? And that extends across commercial partnerships all the way to kind of the more splashy, kind of stunty, you know, business development partnerships. So.
Great. And Nathan, I think, you know, you've had, you know, some specific experience, obviously, with the new Bud Light partnership. Congratulations on that. You know, it sounds like that's a really great example of how a brand has literally done that today. So would you like to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of great brands out there that are doing it the right way. We've got one on our panel. I think that, you know, when you look at what Bud Light has done, right, and they've gone the gambit, right? They've done the Bud Light All-Stars, which, you know, had some tepid results. They've done things with Riot Games, with Overwatch League. They've done stuff with, you know, Twitch Rivals now. I think the key overall for brands looking into this space is consistency. And I think it's really important to talk with your partners and understand who your partners are and where they're going. I think, you know, I'm not sure if Greg told me this or not, but I think someone very intelligently told me originally that the biggest decision they have to make is not what they do in esports, but who they do it with in esports. And I think that's a really insightful thing that I tell a lot of other brands looking to get in the space, is that there's 1,000 things that you can do in gaming and esports. And it's very easy to get opportunity paralysis very, very quickly when you're like, oh, I could do this, or I could do this, or I could do this. It's like there's too much there. And I think for brands, it's about understanding yourself, understanding what you're trying to get out of this, and then finding the partners that can align with that goal and can deliver that value back to you as a brand and to the community, to Matt's point. And I think when you look at what Bud Light has done, like they're not trying to be Xfinity Internet, right? They're not trying to be Logitech keyboards, right? Like they are there for drinking occasions. They want to be fun. They want to be playful. They want to be the everyman and woman. And that's where you see what they're activating in terms of all of this stuff is after shows, right? So it's like after the event's over, let's pop open a Bud Light. Let's talk about what we just watched. Let's get some insight. Let's have some fun. Let's talk about these things. And I think that's where Bud Light has figured out where to play. And they did that by trial and error. They did that by talking to their partners, by asking the community what they want. And then you see stuff that they've done with like the Bud Light Beer League, right? Where they've partnered with Tekken, the Soul Calibur World Tours, and they've been able to use those games and create opportunities where last year, you know, they sent someone from the Bud Light Beer League to Bangkok, Thailand to compete in the Tekken World Championships. And the guy almost qualified for the finals event, which is incredibly cool. But for Bud Light, it's about, again, it's about empowering the every person. And I think that when you as a brand can come into the space and say, this is what I want to do, this is who I am, I might need to change my tactics, but I don't want to change who I am to be in this space. I think that's when, if you have the right partners and you've chosen the right people correctly, that's where those things just come out naturally. And you see great programs like the Beer League, like what they're doing with Twitch Rivals and the after show. You see things like the Gillette Gaming Alliance, right? Like that wasn't our first pass at partnership. That was our second or third pass, and that's okay. But I think when you come into the space as a brand and you're looking at how do you conquer these partnerships, and you look for credibility. That's my word. I'm not an A guy. I'm more of a C guy, as my college professors would tell you. I like to think about credibility because you have to earn credibility. You can't give credibility to yourself. So no more authenticity, all about credibility. And I think that when you're trying to earn that credibility, right, you got to do that from the community. You got to listen, and you got to work with the right partners. So it's been very successful. Not everything has been successful, but I think for brands, just feel comfortable in who you are in your skin, and find the right people to help you with the right tactics.
Absolutely. I think that's a phenomenal point. Greg, I'd love to dive in a little bit more into Gillette's journey into esports and how things have changed since COVID. You obviously have a phenomenal activation in play at the moment with the Gillette Gaming Alliance. It's a team of influencers who are actively sponsored by Gillette, and would love to hear a little bit more about that and your experience with COVID around that program. Sorry, Greg, looks like you're on mute.
I told you I'm better when I'm muted, so I make more sense. But it's been quite a journey, especially with over the last 3 to 4 months. We've been lucky to find a good formula that's worked for us, and as Nathan says, it's been we've had some we called it some learning moments. So we've had those. We got in early 4 or 5 years ago. We sponsored a large event. We had an influencer, a gamer that we sponsored with Xbeke. We worked closely with Twitch. We worked with TSM for a little while, and then again also working with Twitch, but then trying to figure out a formula where we could reach out more and touch the community more. One of our biggest things that we've had to do, we're Procter and Gamble. We're owned by Procter and Gamble. There's some brilliant people in this company. I'm not one of them, but there's some good ones. But we are very aggressive and very pushy, and we love advertising, and we like to sell our product, and we want to hit you. You can't do that with this community. You've got to pay attention. You've got to be part of it. You've got to be invited in, and you have to. And to Nathan's point and Matty's point is that you got to listen, and you got to find. And one of the things that from early in my career with working at Gatorade, and we were all about relationships, and sports was always about that, because you didn't know you're going to run into that same person again somewhere else, and you needed those relationships. And it was not always about the money and the deal, it was about the relationships. And that's what it is in this community. It's what you've built. And we've been lucky. We've worked very, very close with Nathan and his team at Twitch and putting together the Alliance, working with our influencers. We have gotten a lot closer to our influencers now, where we're talking to them, we're listening to what they're telling us. And our Bits for Blades program, where you buy blades, and obviously Twitch has this company, this small company behind them called Amazon, And so we're able to move a few blades off of that. But in turn with that, we're going to have an appreciation. We're rewarding Twitch bits, so they can get up to member of the community. If you're looking for blades, you can get up to 250 bits, which is, that program has just been phenomenal this year. A lot of that has probably been due to the COVID, with people being in and being active more. But we've also tried to figure out how do we make an impact. And we were part of the Stream Aid program, which was launched really 2 weeks into our lock-in in March, end of March, which was quite successful. And we brought in Procter and Gamble as part of that, as the overall, an overall sponsor. And we worked closely with them, but there was a lot of learning there of how to work with Twitch that we had to give Procter. It's not, it's not like you're turning on a major television network and you're advertising and you can control things and do things the way we normally do. You've got to stop and you got to pay attention. We've also used our influencers for charity streams. We just finished one with Dr. Lupo a couple of days ago, and again, very, very successful. And yes, we have branding, yes, we have some things, but now we've even been more accepted within the community. We've actually done a couple of, we can't produce commercials or a lot of content. We can't do content, but not commercials and shooting during this time, and we're big on shooting things. So we've actually worked with Loaded and Dr. Lupo to try to put together a new spot for him talking about our blades, and it's been a lot of fun. And we have a new one that's coming out in a couple of weeks that we're doing some animation, which is stuff we've never been able to do before. But it's with this challenging environment, we're being able to have a lot more fun. But we also do things, but we do it without telling anybody, because if we tell somebody, they're gonna kill it. So we just have to run. As long as we're safe, we're good.
I love that.
Amazing. And I think that goes back a lot to what we were talking about in the last panel a bit about how brands have the opportunity to really co-create something, develop their own platform, their own identify what the white space is, identify what it is you guys need, and really create something super bespoke, which is great. Thinking about the bits for blades, and to kind of explain that a little bit more to the audience, you're essentially watching Twitch streams and you have the ability to go into Amazon as you're watching the streams, purchase Gillette products, and you actually get Twitch rewards in platform digital rewards. And I love that integration of a retail loop. That's something that brands weren't doing at the time. And it's a phenomenal case study for how to do that. So, and that goes back to a lot of what I'm always talking about how gaming and esports is a real creative space, a quintessential creative solution for brands, for sports, for entertainment. And we've seen that significantly during COVID. So Matty, I'd love to point this question to you. How have you been leveraging your gaming as a whole and your own kind of scale and gaming platform to do more creative executions during COVID?
Yeah. I mean, I love that example of, the partnership between Gillette and Twitch right now, because I mean, it's like getting the right wet clay together. And just like both of these gentlemen spoke about, it's like aligned interests. And I think that's how we always kind of approach the space. And a great example of that, luckily for us, we actually began our, I'll say digital events or kind of live broadcast strategy shortly before COVID began, obviously not knowing that COVID was going to bring us into this new reality. But when we launched the Cash App Compound, which is our facility where we kind of unified our competitive business, our entertainment business, and our apparel business all under one roof to create this kind of wild funhouse atmosphere and capture all this incredible content. We kicked off that launch weekend with what was the $500,000 halftime show. So the observation there with Cash App was like, I don't know if every gamer really cares about the Super Bowl. What if we could go in and find an interesting creative way to conquest that window of time, right? So like we were really focused on windowing and like this one spike moment where we could draft off of a bigger pop culture moment. And what we actually did was we threw a $500,000 Uno tournament with some of the biggest streamers in the world. And that culminated in, I think, like 50 or 60,000 concurrents. It was the first thing we had ever done live. And we had stayed away from live and Twitch for our own IP creation because honestly, like we just didn't know where we could add value in that value chain. I think that experience forced us to start to develop that muscle, and it was wildly successful. So once COVID hit, we were uniquely positioned, I think, because we had already begun to cultivate a lot of those partnerships that we needed to start to move quickly once those things took shape. So like we had live broadcast partners, we had studio partners, we had casting talent relationships. Like we had the right wet clay to adapt to the situation. I think that that was one of the things in Tatiana's opening that is really exciting about gaming and esports right now is we're dealing with these really adaptive assets in which we've invested. And so for us during COVID, I mean, being able to move fast, I think it was like the second week of lockdown and we threw Warzone from home, which at the time was the biggest Warzone tournament that had ever been thrown. You know, we moved really quickly on Valorant. We're super bullish on that IP. And for us, you know, at a team level, we have to really think about, okay, you've got these power players of the platforms. They have incredible technology and they have these huge communities. They have the publishers who have this incredible IP, right? You've got talent, right? All of these things, like what can 100 Thieves do to add value? And so I think that moving forward from our learnings with COVID and how exciting the live environment can be, we're really trying to reimagine our entire live broadcast strategy. So you're going to see us begin to roll out an entire slate of digital events and live broadcast kind of entertainment programming. So COVID has been really disruptive, but in a lot of ways a really positive and kind of like growth oriented experience for us.
Love that.
Sorry, that was so long-winded.
No, it's great, and it's been good to see how adaptive folks like 100 Thieves and Twitch are in creating new content, live streaming experiences, and when thinking about the Twitch scene as a whole, I've been there's a term I've been using called it's kind of like experiential streaming in a way. It's these live content experiences are not simply just I'm just going to watch a broadcast and my experience with this is limited to sitting back and viewing. It's incredibly interactive. The Twitch chat is always going. There's engagement, there's voting, there's links under the stream, just like with the Gillette Gaming Alliance and live clicking and live purchasing, there's also a live engagement experiences that can be overlaid into these things. And so what we've seen interestingly is folks like yourself creating these tournaments, folks like I recall Bud Light as well developing their own Warzone tournament with sports pros. Chipotle worked with you on their Challenger series, their own Warzone tournament. So there's been a lot of like now branded like experiential content really that's being developed as a response to COVID.
Yeah, I think it's, there's a lot to unpack there. I think that, there's been a lot of desire for innovation, and there's obviously a lot of marketing dollars that are being shifted and stuff like that. I think there's a couple of mistakes that brands are making right now when they talk to us is like they come to us and they say, hey, so I've got this like NCAA football deal and that's not going to happen this year. So how do I do NCAA football on Twitch? I don't have an answer for that. Hey, I've got a deal with the Professional Bull Riders Association. How do we do bull riding on Twitch? I don't have an answer for that. I think you have to understand that you're going from one section to another, and And getting into esports, you're going to have different tactics than traditional sports. So keeping an open mind of, hey, what should I do? If I do these things over here, what should that look like over here? Let those partners help you find the right things. As well, I can't stress enough the value of media in all of this. I think a lot of people and a lot of brands will do really, really great activations, then put no media support behind it, and no one hears about it because there's 7 million channels on Twitch. And we've had that, that's like a 50% growth in channel creation over the last like 4 months. And so if you think about it like a television station, right? If there are 7 million channels on your dial, how are you going to find that one channel? You're going to find that through media and promotion and awareness drivers. So I think it's incredibly important to do that. I know, Greg talked about the Gillette Gaming Alliance and like those charity streams that we've done. All of those streams were supported with media buys that put them on the front page of Twitch's website. That created traffic driving opportunities to utilize, promotional units and stuff like that to increase the viewership, increase the overall awareness of what's going on. It's super important to do that. No program does well by itself, and that goes with Twitch Rivals. That goes with everything that we do. We always try to package in media to get that size and scale out there. The other mistake that I think people make is assuming that game publishers are always just going to be okay with what you're doing, and you have to understand that like. I can go throw a golf tournament, and Twitch is next week, teed up, watch it. It's going to be great. Celebrities playing golf. We can do that all day long because no one owns the IP rights for golf. But if I want to play League of Legends, I don't care if it's a pickup tournament, if it's a world championship, Riot Games got to be involved. And I think that a lot of brands naively think, oh, well, people stream this game all the time. I can just stream it too. And you can in certain instances, and you can in certain ways, but don't expect to have usage rights. I have too many brands that come to us and say, oh, I want to do something with Rocket League. Okay, well, we have to go talk to Psyonix and Epic about that. Like, I don't own the rights to that. I don't own the responsibility. So, I just think it's important. Like, we're all working at this, and a lot of teams have great relationships with brands. We have great relationships with publishers. It just doesn't guarantee anything. And I just want to make sure that it's clear for folks of like coming into this space, the publishers have a lot more power than in other sports and entertainment spaces. And it's just an important thing to think about as a brand before you come in just thinking that you can just do something like that. I think lastly, overall with just the creativity that's going on right now, yeah, we're seeing athletes playing Warzone. We're seeing athletes playing Uno. I love the Uno stuff. I think it's really great. And I think we're seeing concerts now. We worked with Verizon as well as Gillette and P&G on our StreamAid program. We had like something of 92 live shows within a 12-hour broadcast, raised almost $3 million for COVID relief back in March, right? Back when it was really just a beginning thing. Learned a lot about how to throw a live event just out of the gate. But we had great partners, right? We had great partners who believed in what we were doing and were willing to just kind of jump in and work on that. And to Greg's point, the folks at Bounty, another P&G brand, we actually shot, edited, and created a custom commercial for them with live influencers from their houses. And it's an incredible learning process to realize how big a Bounty spill can be and how small. Like, there's very specific sizes, and there's a very important process of how Bounty gets the quicker picker upper picks it up. But we were able to shoot, edit, and put out an entire commercial remotely, and that's the kind of innovation that Matt was talking about. Of like, that's stuff that none of us are equipped to do right now. None of us are equipped to know how to do it, but we're learning and we're innovating and we're finding new solutions of how to do things the right way. And I'll give props to the Verizon Pay It Forward program, who came on and leveraged and connected the dots between musicians and athletes and celebrities and all this stuff for small business. That's where Twitch is really powerful. And I think as brands look to have that connection point, engagement's what we do. You want 2 billion users. Facebook's got 2 billion users. We've got 250 million users worldwide, and they're really engaged. They're spending an hour and a half to 2 hours a day on the platform. They're dialed into your brand. They want to talk to your brand. And I think that's really the magic of all that we're putting together here.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And there's a point that you touched upon quite a bit that I definitely want to spend some time on around more purpose-driven initiatives. Fundraising for charity. There's been a lot of that on Twitch. I know, Greg, you mentioned specifically fundraising with Dr. Lupo, the Twitch Stream Aid did COVID fund relief raising. Matty, you Warzone from Home raised money for COVID relief as well, if I'm remembering correctly. So there's a lot of purpose-driven initiative and opportunity there. I would love to open it up to all three of you to talk a little bit more about your experience with that, what works, and why this platform is so great for that fundraising.
Yeah, I'll do a start and let these guys talk more because I just talked a lot. But a couple of stats that we're really proud of is $200 million has been raised on the Twitch platform since 2011. Now that's not Twitch raising it; that's money raised on the platform. Over $200 million, 50 million of that plus has been in the last 12 months. So incredible stuff. Our community is very generous, and I think our content creators do an amazing job with that. Also, Dr. Lupo just surpassed $6 million of money raised by himself to St. Jude and the charity aspect of him since 2018. So there's a lot of that happening. I think, there's a lot of questions in the chat about, COVID-19 and the results and stuff like that. I think from Twitch's perspective, we've seen a lot more people interested in the platform, watching content, creating content. But more importantly, we're seeing a tremendous effort from people to support charities, to support initiatives. We've been doing a ton of work with Black Lives Matter over the last couple of weeks. We've been doing, this is Pride Month. We've always been doing really strong programs around supporting Pride. And there's actually a custom emote this month. So if you sub to a channel and you actually gift a sub to somebody, you get these cool custom Pride emotes that you can use in chat, and everybody gets them. So I think as a platform, Twitch is trying to be incredibly inclusive. We are not a First Amendment platform, so there are rules. But I think, as all of us can attest, going live on the internet is a brave thing. And our first and foremost focus on this is to empower people to feel comfortable and confident to do that. And charity is just a really rich and wonderful part of the Bleed Purple, right, culture.
Yeah, I'll jump in off of that. And, we found, the Stream Aid was just amazing for us to be involved in and from a company wide. But as a company, we've been doing anything just quite a bit to support the world, I guess, with COVID. And, we can always do more. We're big. Just in Boston alone, we've donated face masks that we had, because we have a plant here in Boston. So we had the N95s and donated that to our local hospitals. We found a way to make hand sanitizer from our aerosol and our shaving cream plants. So we've been dropping 60-gallon drums off to the hospitals and to the centers and to the homeless centers as well. We found out, one of our engineers figured out how to take our plastic that we use for packaging and make face shields. So we've made 300,000 face shields for our first responders. And so, but those are things but again, getting on the platform, working across all of our five of our influencers, we've been able to raise quite a bit of money. I mean, I don't know the total. Nathan may know better than I do about the total because it keeps coming in, but it's been phenomenal to be a part of that, but it makes our employees feel good. It makes the community feel good, and this community, as you see, they're interacting. They're on the channels 90 minutes. That's the average, I think, and they're incredibly engaged and incredibly passionate. That's one thing we have found, and that's why we're so proud to be involved, and that's why we try to be so careful we don't shoot ourselves in the foot with trying to do too much, because you've got to be selective. You got to listen. You got to pay attention, and that's kind of the three do's that we kind of follow as a brand as we continue to look forward and where do we go next, and we're in the midst of planning that now.
Amazing. Thanks for that insight. What we'll do next is I'm going to invite all of our panelists back on for the last 7 to 10 minutes or so, and we'll open it up to questions. And the first question that I want to ask and make it a little messy because anyone can jump in here is, according to a recent study by Enigma, gaming and esports fans are among the most open to digital events as a live events alternative. However, they ultimately don't see esports as a long-term replacement for these live events. And to clarify, they don't see the digital kind of replacements, digital alternatives as a long-term replacement, even though they're really quite open to it. So in your experience, do you feel this statement is accurate?
That is a spicy question. Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in really quick. I mean, it's hard for me as someone who's grown up playing sports, going to sporting events, going to concerts. Like, that is a normal part of my life. It is interesting to look at gaming culture and to see people younger than myself, which isn't too hard to do, to be, who look at digital friends and physical in real life friends as just friends, right? And they go onto Twitch and they feel an incredible sense of community online, and they play video games like World of Warcraft and Valorant and League of Legends, and they have friends from all over the world who they've never met in real life but feel just as comfortable and tied to them as that. I do see a changing tide in terms of physical and live events. I do see an opportunity. I think that there's always going to be a balance. But if you look at what we're seeing and you're looking at the opportunity, I mean, listen, we're devastated that we had to cancel TwitchCon, both in Amsterdam this year and now in San Diego. It's certainly something that we'd like to have, that IRL in real life experience. But I do believe that, as we go forward, as technology goes forward, as we deal with pandemics, there are going to be more and more switches to the ability to do things and to live life like Ready Player One. Maybe not as exactly like that, but I do see the world becoming more and more okay with digital friends just being friends, and digital environments just being as immersive and as exciting as physical environments, to a certain extent. I don't think there's going to be an extreme either way where one's going to go away, but I do see the pendulum tilting that direction, at least for the foreseeable future.
Great.
I'll jump in. I'll echo some of what Nathan said and really make the point that I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think, as Nathan said, that look, there are loads of people who have found community within the digital ecosystems that they find themselves, and those very same people and our fans certainly tell us all the time that they want opportunity to come together. Our GM, a wonderful woman named Dom, our GM of our Call of Duty team, she tells the story of she's a Call of Duty player, has been since she was a young kid playing with her dad. She was at college and wasn't able to find sort of her group. And when she started going to live events across North America, that's when she really found her true friend base and really decided that this was her future. And so, again, I think they're complements to each other, and we're extraordinarily lucky to have platforms like Twitch and partners like Bell and others that help us to bring this to life digitally. And the future is bringing these communities together, both online and live. And so we will continue to do both, and we will absolutely pursue an opportunity regionally to bring together fans of esports and fans of certainly the two leagues we're in Canada. So looking forward to that.
I love that. I mean, I would definitely agree when I'm helping to define brand strategies and things like that. I always recommend a very holistic approach that takes into account live content as well as experiential. So that's fantastic. Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in before I move on to the next question? Great. So I know, Dave, in particular, you are interested in answering this one. How can brands avoid getting caught in the negatives of esports and gaming as it relates to bullying or addiction while activating the platform? We all know that there's a lot of stereotypes that aren't always a reality of gaming and esports, and would love to hear your thoughts on that.
It's not an easy question. And I think for a brand, you need to really look at yourself and decide how you want to have a position. And I'm fortunate that I work with an organization that's very progressive and lean forward on mental health. And if you think about if we think about esports and we think about gaming, World Health Organization has a point of view that, screen time is a concern, screen time specific to gaming. And they've used labels suggesting addiction. And I, instead of sort of dismissing that discussion and pushing it aside, what we do every year, and it's a part of our Bell Let's Talk campaign, is we engage heavily in the gaming community and the esports community. And if I look at, sort of the attribute of participation on Bell Let's Talk Day, one of our largest contributors globally, because it is a global platform on that day, is the gaming community. When I look at our overall, what was it, 140 million social interactions on the day, as a proportionate to percentage of audience, it was our gaming community who drove the discussion around mental health. So, I think the gaming community itself and the esports community recognize screen time can be a concern. So on that side, we've chosen as a brand to sort of lean in on that discussion when appropriate, and also challenge a little bit, as a parent, you need to set expectation as well in terms of managing screen time at home as you have young adolescent children playing. We always talk about screen time. On the other side though, and I know the question was specific or sort of started to lean into the genre of esport, and we talk about sports sim, we talk about fantasy, we talk about shooter, first person shooters. And, again, I kind of look at it as a part of your marketing strategy where you want to lean in. I think that the beauty of, Nathan sort of spoke to how many channels sit within Twitch, the beauty of the opportunity, and even, with Gopal and Allison with the teams and leagues, you can skew fantasy if that's where you want to focus, and you can steer away from, I'll describe it as shooters, or at least shooters that sort of model, behavior that, we feel uncomfortable with. CSGO is a great example of Counter-Strike and sort of terrorist, anti-terrorist, right? So for me, I think, as you look at your strategy as a brand, don't dismiss the gaming category in as a whole and say, yeah, no, it's violent, it's this, it's bad. Look at it more, tactically and strategically in terms of where you want to lean in. If it's fantasy, if it's sports sim, NBA 2K is sports sim, right? It's basketball. Or it could be League of Legends, which is, it's chess. If you really look at it, League is really just an incredibly intense game of chess in terms of how the board moves and how quickly it plays out, right? But, that's kind of how we as a brand approach it, and then have an honest conversation about where you want to get involved. MMV, like if you think about mixed martial arts and cage matches on pay-per-view, it's pretty violent, and you can say that's not for us, or gambling isn't for us, and there, I think as a brand, you start to align your set of values around where you're comfortable. And the beauty of the gaming industry and esports in specific is there's a lane for you, and pick your lane and then work within it.
Amazing advice. Thank you.
I was just gonna say, I think to that point too, I think it comes down to research and thought and really good thought, because, while you can look at a game like CSGO at the top level, it's like, oh, it's terrorists and they're shooting. The depth of that game, the team, requirements, the physical requirements, the skill level that goes into those games, when to buy, when not to buy, which side to go at, like those games are incredibly deep and are very enriching if you talk about it from a team building perspective and stuff like that. Ultimately, brands have to make the choice. But I think if you look at the world, I mean, if you look at sports, right, there's UFC and some brands are okay with that. They're okay with boxing. More folks are okay with hockey. There's still some dark sides on hockey, right? There's still fighting in hockey. You have to, as a brand, I think, dive into these situations, look at each one of them and do some internal reflection and be confident and comfortable with your answer, right? And to not dismiss things right off the bat of like, oh, no, I see a gun, I can't possibly associate with this game. Understand what the game is, understand the audience that's there, make sure it's a relevant fit for your audience, but don't dismiss it right off the bat just because you think it looks too violent or looks not like your game. You'd be surprised, especially with fighting games, how deep and enriching that audience is and how valuable that can be as well. Same with Call of Duty, and so I just think it's important for brands to really to take that time to do the right research.
Very true. I like to say a lot that CSGO and Call of Duty titles like this have a lot of strategic value, teamwork value, leadership, a lot of those traits that brands really want to align with. So it's also about understanding, as you're kind of alluding to, that scene. I think I interrupted someone if someone else wants to jump in on this one.
No, I was I was just going to add the sort of the narrative, which is, I always think about the largest brands in terms of entertainment franchises, and you sort of go to like a Star Wars, and ultimately Star Wars is fantasy violence. There's lightsabers and blasters and good and evil, white and black. And, as a parent and as a brand, you start to look at that and you start to reconcile. Nathan's absolutely right. There's a bit of a gut check where you want to participate. But I also would challenge you that, from, tweens to adolescent to, even the Harry Potter franchise at some level is fantasy violence. And, these are the conversations that, I'm having at boardrooms, which is amazing to me, but it's sort of, you have to use part of that counter conversation around, the rebuttal to video games are violence. And I'm like, wow, have we watched Harry Potter lately? And it's, the reality is sometimes you have to go to a common sense conversation around what entertainment means for family today and the segments of audience we deal with. And then very quickly the conversation starts to pivot into a marketing conversation, not a bias-based conversation.
Amazing, thank you. It looks like we are out of time. I just want to thank everyone so much for joining. Your insights and stories have been amazing, really valuable. So thank you everyone for joining. I am going to hand it now to Jared, who will close out this session.
Perfect. Thanks, Tatiana, and thank you to all of our speakers for taking the time today. Clearly so much to cover off in this topic, and looking at how many folks are still with us, it's something that there's a lot of appetite for more discussion around. So thank you all for your time. Thank you as well to Gord and to Aubrey for working with me on putting this all together. And we look forward to bringing the sponsorship community back together for more events like this over the next couple months. Have a great day. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Jared.